assume they're focusing on him because he's capable of releasing it in a very high-profile way. If he releases it, people are going to pay attention. But one of the videos is of a transmedium device, something that is apparently someone in the military filmed this, that it was flying above the ocean and then went into the ocean. When you're seeing all these things, they appear around the ocean. Why do you think that is? Do you have any speculation?
Well, it's we're pretty blind down there at the end of the day, right? We don't have as good a SAL, say, or as much presence in the ocean as we do in the air, I would say. We do have, a lot of sensors, and we can likely see certain things, but radiation, electromagnetic radiation, doesn't propagate very well through water like that. So in a way, it's kind of be a good place to hide, I would suggest. There's talks of hydrogen being a useful fuel source, and of course, plenty of hydrogen in the water. But this is all just pure speculation. I really don't know at the end of the day. But when the video that you mentioned with that kind of trans medium behavior went, directly into the object like that. I'll just say that, that is very unique to see objects like that. People argue about the shape or anything like that. But even if, these objects are coming from, call it a near peer threat, right? And they're still able to do these types of behaviors. At the end of the day, it really comes down to technological surprise, right? Whether that's an adversary on Earth or whether that's, something else. It's the same process of understanding what the capabilities are so that, come 2024, 2025, we don't have, a surprise that we can't counter, whether that's, hypersonic objects flying around that happen to be UAP or whether they happen to be missiles, right? It's essentially the same problem.
The problem is, we don't know if that's coming from an adversary or whether it's coming from an alien. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know how to react, whether this thing is observing us or whether this thing is an actual physical threat.
I've used the word threat before, and for me as a pilot, when an aircraft is flying around out there and they're not talking to me, right? Like say they came into my area and I'm the only one out there, and there's an interloper. That aircraft's a threat to me. It doesn't mean he has hostile intent necessarily, but my aircraft could be lost if I have a midair. If I start doing some tactics and I forget he's there, and now I'm, zorting through his altitude. So he's a threat, very simply. Doesn't mean it's a bad guy or he's got, explosives on his plane. But it's the same way when I talk about these being a threat for aviators out there. It is a safety hazard. Someone could die. We could lose aircraft. I don't think that these objects are displaying hostile intent out there. But even just observation and collection of our, electronic warfare, our communications, our radar frequency, all that information, if it was an earthly threat, that'd be very useful information that they could look to back engineer.
Has there ever been any sort of design or discussion of some sort of a craft that can operate in a transmedium way, that can fly through the air and then go into the ocean?
Nothing that I've seen that's been created, really. I mean,
how would a propulsion system work that would go from the air into the ocean, based on what we understand about like the abilities that we have today?
Sure. On the surface, like to go from air to water isn't necessarily a complete challenge, right? Like you can imagine something that can get dropped into the ocean and perhaps move around, or some type of mini submarine that comes up and then launches a UAV, right, and flies away. But just to be clear to people listening, that's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about an object that is moving at a relatively, quick pace and enters the water as if it wasn't there. And is that what you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way I understand it is it just went right into the water.
And so, that's incredibly interesting for a number of reasons. Propulsion in the air versus propulsion in the water is, typically pretty different. And once you start talking about high speeds underwater, that kind of goes out the door. High speeds underwater, 200 miles an hour or higher, is not like 200 miles in the air. And so when I think of something that can operate in both, the first thing I think of is that, neither are concerned because of its operating system, whether that's air friction or whether that's, the water drag that it would be exposed to. That's like the first kind of like out there thought as far as how this could operate. It would somehow be affecting, the air or the water, right, the liquid around it to move it around the aircraft or to, negate the effect of all that force, right? Because moving underwater is just so much pressure, so much friction that it's just so hard to go fast.
Did you watch that Jeremy Corbell documentary, Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers?
I did.
What did you think of that?
It was interesting. I got a cool story for you here. When I was a kid, I was an avid explorer of the internet. And I had stumbled upon what I thought at the time was the coolest possible website ever. There's this guy selling all sorts of like radioactive rocks and like cool scientific equipment. And I was like, this is the coolest website. Like, this is why the internet was built. And fast forward, many years later, I learned that, that was Bob's website.
Oh, United Nuclear.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I heard it. It might have been in that movie actually, or the documentary. And I was like, holy smokes, like that's that guy. But the story's fascinating. Here's my only, I don't want to say I believe or disbelieve, because this is such a controversial area when people start like drawing these, conclusions. So, I want to be able to establish the ability to do real science on this topic, right? Like, I want to be able to, get a material or to get a bit of information and have a real peer review process that is going to look at that information objectively without the stigma that UAP have had. Even Bob's story, right, comes with, people either, hate it or love it. Yeah. It's very controversial. But at the end of the day, data is data. And if we can, perhaps get element 115 or some other thing that could be used to do an analysis, and we can write papers, we'll have a process to take that forward and be able to say, hey, here's now a flag in the sand that we can kind of move science forward on this, unique topic.